Yeah, I really didn't know anything about him either. I knew about him because when I was younger, I went to like a family like get together and one of my uncles like wouldn't stop talking about the chupacabra. Like we were like outside and he like kept showing me pictures of the chupacabra and being like, this guy's crazy." I mean, he was right.
Welcome, folks, to the Creature Feature Picture Show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all with us here tonight. Without further ado, let's introduce our ghastly hosts.
The chupacabra in Spanish literally translates to the goat sucker, and I'm gonna tell you why. In 1975, before the chupacabra ever had a name, there were many strange livestock killings that occurred in Texas and Puerto Rico, mostly in Puerto Rico. And what happened was that several farm animals in like one farm would be found dead and drained of blood. Like I said, the majority of these attacks took place in Puerto Rico, and they started becoming more and more common leading up to 1995. And at this point, no one had actually witnessed the attacks, and no one knew like what could have caused them. They would just wake up, go outside, and 8 of their cows or goats or pigs were dead. So in March of 1995, 8 sheep were found dead on a farm, drained of blood, and these sheep had 3 strange puncture marks on their chest.
This is one of those weird things. If the chupacabra isn't real, right? Someone had to go out and kill their sheep and then suck all the blood out of them themselves.
Right, and this didn't just happen once. Like, this happened many times.
Did the sheep have wounds other than the 3 puncture marks?
Not that was stated, and I think that would have been
That's so
said.
weird.
So later in 1995, in August, 150 domestic animals were killed, also with 3 puncture wounds, and this event happened in Canovanas, Puerto Rico. Nearly 30 citizens of the town claimed to have seen a unique creature after this event, claiming that it looked reptilian but moved kinda weird. The name Chupacabra was coined after this event. In December of 1965, there were 9 reported attacks, just in that 1 month, and they continued up until May of 1996, causing over 1,000 deaths of livestock and pets. These attacks later spanned from Puerto Rico up to Mexico and then all the way up to Michigan and Oregon, allegedly. I don't necessarily believe that the attacks that high up were from the chupacabra. The description of the killings was very different than the killings of the chupacabra, where these animals more north were like completely skinned, and that I think that is just like some strange guy going out and skinning animals for fun. Like, I don't think an animal would go out and do that.
He was just trying to shake things up a little bit. Come on.
Yeah, maybe
he got
you're
bored.
Right. Maybe
he got bored of just the
bored.
draining blood. He wanted a new fur coat, okay? He was getting a little chilly.
You're right. And these more northern attacks were more recent. So to me, the most notable attacks didn't occur any more north than like Florida and Texas. Like, it was mostly Puerto Rico, a little bit in Mexico, a little bit in Texas, I think a little bit in Florida. So in 2008, there was a video taken by 2 Texan police officers of this dog-like creature running away. It definitely looked like a weird dog, but to me it looked very dog-like, and this creature was claimed to have been the chupacabra. I don't agree with that. Like, they went out and they killed that dog, and there are like pictures of like reporters holding up its head.
Oh my god!
Like, it looks like a weird dog, but it looks like a dog.
That poor dog. It didn't even do anything, did it? Was it just running away?
No, it was just like running away, because the police officers were like, look at that weird dog, and following it around.
That was...
No shit, it's gonna...
Yeah, of course it's gonna run away. Oh, that poor creature.
Yeah. So the more recent sightings are a little iffy, but the sightings in Puerto Rico in the 1990s, very weird, very strange, very consistent. So overall, the Chupacabra has been seen, at least its like killings have been seen by hundreds, if not thousands of people. It killed a lot of animals. It was seen mostly in Puerto Rico, but as time progressed, started being seen in the southern United States. And there were also less notable sightings in South America, including Chile and Argentina. So in the earlier sightings in Puerto Rico, the Chupacabra was described as a very large lizard-like creature that had a frilled back. And frilled back is kind of like, I'll put a picture up, but it's when an animal will have like kind of a thin skin stretched over bone. It kind of looks like a sail, like a sailed back dinosaur type thing. It was described as 3 to 4 feet tall when it was on its hind legs and hopped around like a kangaroo. In later sightings in Mexico and the United States, the Chupacabra was described as like a sickly looking dog with little fur, pronounced bones, and fangs and claws. Now to me, these two descriptions kind of sound similar, like with the pronounced bones and a very pronounced spinal ridge that could kind of be seen as a frilled back. If the dog was very sickly looking and didn't have a lot of fur, that could be kind of lizardy. If you think about like mangy animals, their skin is often like dry and almost scaly. So I could see that these two descriptions were just the same creature being described by different people, like a lizard that looks like a dog or a dog that looks like a lizard. They seem kind of similar to me, which is why I decided that a lot of people have these in mind as like two separate creatures. Sometimes the more dog looking one is described as, or is called like a Texan blue dog or something. But I think that these could definitely be the same thing, which is why I decided to put them together.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Or maybe a thought.
Okay.
It really feels like the earlier sightings were incredibly specific and actually talking about this creature. And then, like, the people in the US got a little jealous and they just started blaming random street dogs. Like, oh my god, it's the Chupacabra!
Yeah.
No, that's your neighbor's starving dog.
There were sightings, I believe, there were sightings in Texas that did match, like, this Chupacabra-y type creature, similar killings. But yeah, the more recent it got, like the farther into the future we got, the more iffy, like, sightings and stuff became. So with all this in mind, the Chupacabra has a very strange combination of traits. So what in the world could the Chupacabra be? So my first option is a Canidae. So that is like the family including dogs, like domesticated dogs, wild dogs, coyotes, wolves, those kinds of things. And I didn't pick one specific thing because I feel like it could be like kind of a crossbreed maybe of like maybe coyotes and wolves, or like wild dogs and wolves, or wild dogs and coyotes, like that kind of thing. So I wanted to leave that a little more open-ended. Obviously I picked it because the Chupacabra has literally been described as a dog and has been drawn very dog-like. Like you can see these two pictures down here, but they don't really stand on 2 feet, which is probably the biggest thing. And they, unless it's a really small dog, they would be quite a bit taller than 3 to 4 feet, standing on their hind legs. So my second option is a Komodo dragon. So Komodo dragons can stand on their 2 hind legs and be supported by their tail and like hop around. They are pretty common in zoos, at least in the United States and like the southern United States. They're venomous, but they're much larger than 3 to 4 feet standing on their hind legs, and they don't really have prominent fangs that would make those puncture marks. They have like all of their teeth are the same size. So if you look at like a Komodo dragon bite, like it's actually awful. I don't recommend looking it up, but it does not look like 2 puncture wounds. Okay, my third option is a vampire bat. Now I know that vampire bats don't look anything like dogs or lizards, but hear me out. Vampire bats, they suck the blood of livestock as a food source, which causes 2 very distinct puncture marks. I have a picture down below. Like, if you think of a vampire bite, that's what they look like. They already live in South and Central America, and I can see how, like, flying could be seen as hopping. Like, if they flap and they just maybe go up a couple feet and go back down, that's kind of hopping-ish. However, they're a lot smaller than the Chupacabra, and their wings, I imagine, would be very hard to hide. So, description-wise is a little rough, but behavior, they are literally Chupacabras if we're talking about goat suckers. Like, that's what they do. So those are my options.
Very cool.
In my opinion, as a very professional biologist, I think that the Komodo dragon is kind of the shoe-in for this. I think it matches the best. And honestly, I kind of feel like the Canidae and the vampire bats are almost equally long shots for, like, different reasons. Like, I feel like they both match the Chupacabra equally in different ways.
Should we pick?
I do have to say I am gonna snatch Komodo dragon.
Understandable. I am gonna pick vampire bats just because
Amazing.
I think
that would be really fun.
it would be a more interesting debate.
Okay. Rock, paper, scissors, rock.
Darn.
Okay, well, Maggie and I didn't predetermine the winner of the rock, paper, scissors, but we did predetermine the order. I just wanted to play for the love of the game. But Maggie's gonna go first on this one and I'll go second.
Let us talk about Komodo dragons. And before we get started, I would like everybody to take a moment and thank whatever higher power you believe in. And if you don't believe in one, thank the universe or Mother Nature that Komodo dragons only live on one island because they are so scary. Let me tell you why these guys are so terrifying, and why you'll never win against them in a fight. Komodo dragons, the males can grow up to 10 feet tall, and they're quadrupeds, so they walk on all fours. So when I say tall, I mean length. And females can grow up to 6 feet. Which is much larger than the Chupacabra. However, Komodo dragons have a issue with inbreeding, which I'll get into a little bit later. But inbreeding can cause a lot of changes in physical appearance and also behavior. So speaking of behavior, Komodo dragons can actually stand up on their hind legs and are supported by their tail, primarily as like a mating tactic to fight other males for the attention of a female or for predation. And they can also like hop around while they're standing on two legs.
Ew!
And they like kind of slap their
ew.
they like slap their chests against each other. Have you ever seen a photo of two Komodo dragons standing up? It's so goofy.
No.
It's so silly. So Komodo dragons are apex predators and they have no really natural predators. Occasionally they might lose a fight to something like a really large crocodilian or a hippopotamus, but they don't often lose those fights. They are very strong swimmers. They can't swim very far, but they can swim fast. The young can also climb and will often climb to hide from adults that want to eat them because they like to eat their children sometimes. And they are venomous and they release poison on almost every bite. So you can't run and you can't hide. You just have to pray. So nowadays, Komodo dragons are only found in Komodo National Park, which is in Indonesia, and it's a very limited, small island in Indonesia. They used to be prevalent not everywhere in Indonesia, but more on that island, but they've kind of been forced into the one island. They are occasionally found in zoos, and they have been trafficked as illegal pets. Komodo dragons have a very small population in Komodo National Park, so inbreeding is a really big issue. Females can actually undergo parthenogenesis, which essentially means that the female is breeding with herself, so she doesn't need a male. But the problem with this is that, I know, right? Isn't that crazy?
Cool.
Right? But when a female produces an offspring using this method, they are only male, so that causes even more inbreeding. Natural selection acts in populations and can only increase traits that are beneficial to survival. There is no way that selection can increase harmful or neutral traits. Mutations can occur, and those can be harmful, they could be beneficial, or they could be neutral. It's completely random. Inbreeding depression occurs when a harmful trait is increased because of inbreeding. So inbreeding can't increase the rate of mutation in a species or population, but if you have a group of 4 Komodo dragons and they're all related to each other, they're gonna share a lot of traits, and if they have some of those harmful traits, they're gonna be passed down to offspring. And because they're related and both parents will have that harmful trait, then the offspring will have that harmful trait. Instead of one Komodo dragon breeding with another that has a harmful trait, but one of them doesn't, then the offspring may or may not have that trait. If that makes sense. So inbreeding increases the prevalence of harmful traits if they already exist in a population. So there have been instances of Komodo dragons being trafficked into Puerto Rico as pets. And when people adopt exotic pets that are illegal, they oftentimes don't realize the intense care and sometimes the great size that they will become. And so these pets are often discarded into the wild when the owners don't want to deal with them anymore. So this could have created a very, very small, quote unquote, wild population in Puerto Rico. Since Komodo dragons don't really have any predators and they can kind of just kill everything, I don't really see how Puerto Rico would be different than anywhere else in the world for them. And so if you remember what I talked about with inbreeding depression, size is often very affected by inbreeding, and Komodo dragons were actually thought to be a lot larger than they are now back in the day. And by back in the day, I mean thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago. So Komodo dragons at 10 feet are already smaller versions of a Komodo dragon. If a very, very small population of Komodo dragons was living in Puerto Rico, the amount of inbreeding in that population would be insane, and I do think that size would be the first thing to go. But a lot of other things can be affected by inbreeding depression, such as behavior, and inbreeding can cause malnutrition. So all of this put together, malnutrition can make the spinal ridge of a Komodo dragon a lot more prominent. It can also cause a snout to be shortened, making the face look a little different. If the behavior is changed because of inbreeding, it could cause Komodo dragon males to stand on their hind legs, not for any particular reason, since the behavior is already innate in the Komodo dragon. It's not something that they learn to do. So they could just start doing it just randomly if they're a little confused. Komodo dragons may have started biting prey without actually eating it, and the prey would still die because of their venom, again, because of confusion from inbreeding. The only thing I can't really explain about the Chupacabra is the bite marks, because all of the teeth in a Komodo dragon are the same size, so it wouldn't create those puncture marks. The only thing I have to say about this is maybe it was a random neutral mutation. There's not really any reason for Komodo dragons to have fangs, but maybe it just kind of happened. I don't know. That's all. I can't really do anything with that.
My guys are significantly less scary and significantly more cute, I think, at least. So I'm going to be talking about vampire bats. Vampire bats are sanguivores, which means their diet is 100% blood. They're actually the only mammal that we know of that can survive on 100% blood. And they typically feed from cows, pigs, horses, and birds. And in one day, these bats have to drink at least 40% of their body weight minimum to survive. And if they don't feed after 2 days, so 2 full days of not feeding, they will die. Their metabolism is too fast. They have to basically constantly be eating a huge amount of blood to survive. Now, these guys also have really cool feeding adaptations and strategies. Of course, like most bats, they're nocturnal, which means they only feed at night. And to find food, vampire bats glide above the tree canopies, and their ears are so sensitive that they can identify specific animals from their breathing patterns alone. So they can go and feed on the same animal. I know, they can feed on the same animal multiple nights in a row just by their breathing. It's crazy. And so when they identify a prey, or a prey source, a blood source, they use specialized thermoreceptors in their noses, which is like a they identify temperature to find blood that's flowing under the skin. And then they'll start licking the skin until it becomes tender and use their incredibly sharp teeth to create incisions. And as they lap up the blood, there's a protein in their saliva called draculin, which I think is a genius name, that acts as an anticoagulant, so it stops the blood from clotting and instead keeps it flowing so they can keep eating. And they also have other salivary proteins that act as numbing agents so the animal doesn't wake up. Now, after the bats are done feeding, they are often too fat to fly because they drink so much blood. So they kind of have to like skitter away and then rest for a little while before they can fly back to their colonies. I know, it's so cute. So cute. They're little walking blood bags at that point. Now, colonies. These bats are also social, which of course a lot of bats are, but vampire bats roost in trees, abandoned buildings, wells, caves, and mines all throughout Latin America. And typically one colony is about 100 bats, but there have been colonies found over 1,000. Now, males typically live separately unless they're dominant, then they'll live with the group, but females all live together, so females in their family units live in these giant colonies. And these bats are known to be altruistic, which is incredibly rare in the animal kingdom. So altruism is when you do something nice for someone without expectation of getting it back. So if a vampire bat has fed really well, they can often be found spitting up blood for bats that haven't been able to secure a meal to keep them alive. And female bats especially are known for this, and they take special care of new mother bats, and they have been seen to feed, they've been seen to feed new mother bats for up to 2 weeks while she's raising her pups. It's so freaking cute. And finally, locomotion. In the whole world, only 2 bat species can maneuver at all on land, and that is the burrowing bat, which is in New Zealand, and the vampire bat. Vampire bats specifically can run with a unique bounding gait where instead of their hind limbs that propel them forwards, it's their front limbs because their wings are so much stronger than their legs. And vampire bats can surprisingly also walk and hop. They are very, very mobile for animals that are not meant to walk or be on the ground really at all. Now, let's get into some counter-arguments, because the Chupacabra, plain and simple, just doesn't really sound like a bat when you first hear it, right? They don't have wings, they're a lot bigger, and they don't have, Maggie, correct me, but the Chupacabra doesn't have super defined ears, right? And I spent so much time thinking about counter-arguments and what to say here, but I found out, after doing a little digging, it actually doesn't really matter. And that is because I found new information about the first Chupacabra sighting that happened in 1975 in Mocha, Puerto Rico. 15 cows, 3 goats, 2 sheep, and a pig were all found dead with puncture wounds on their body. And they were found entirely drained of blood. Like, there was an autopsy that was done on these animals, and their bodies, there was no blood left in their bodies. It's scary. And newspapers named the supposed creature that did this El Vampiro de Mocha, or the Vampire of Mocha. And eyewitnesses described the creature that had killed these animals as a large, flying black bat. 2 decades later, the attacks ramped back up in Puerto Rico, but this time they were described as a large lizard. Why? Well, at the same time the second round of sightings exploded, a horror movie called Species was released, and the main antagonist of this movie was almost identical in description to the reptilian version of the Chupacabra. Like, she had large eyes, a big spiny ridge, green-gray skin, and an upright body position. And a key witness named Madeline Tolentino, who was very influential in the Chupacabra sightings, like the secondary round of them, admitted to watching the movie very shortly before her sighting occurred. And I don't remember the professor's name, but there was a professor who was a biologist who was looking into the Chupacabra. And he talked about how memory can blend real experiences with imagined, and your brain fills in blanks for unexpected events. So in this case, you see an unknown, frightening creature, your brain fills those gaps in and tells you, oh, it looks like this horror movie monster, which is something familiar that you've seen, and then suddenly you've seen, a big reptilian thing instead of whatever monster was actually out there. So I don't think the Chupacabra is a lizard or reptilian at all. I think the first sighting is the most reputable because there was no outside bias. It's just, okay, there are these animals, drained of blood, we saw something fly away, that's it, right? You know, the name came later, the movies came later, but in its core, this was the first Chupacabra sighting that fit the mold of all of the ones to come after. So then, I think, after the movie came out, you know, people started connecting, oh, these weird vampiric attacks are happening as we're seeing this big lizard monster, right? And that's why when people go out looking for the Chupacabra, all they can find is dogs with mange, because the real culprit are large vampire bats that are just hiding in plain sight. That's what I think.
The one thing that I'm like wondering though is if the attacks were from the same creature, why 20 years apart?
Maybe because so these guys are really, like I said, they're social. So I think like there isn't just one Chupacabra, kind of like how your Komodo dragon descendants are, like there are a couple, but I think there are actually a ton of them, and maybe their population just dwindled. You know, they could have gotten a disease that wiped a lot of them out, and the attacks were much less frequent. Maybe they were more on the wildlife versus cattle and all that stuff. You know, I think maybe just the population ebbed, and then it just so happened to burst when this movie came out, and then everyone was freaking out because, you know, they're seeing these monsters. Because also, like, I did want to ask you, weren't there like 1,000 heads of cattle that died from...
Yeah.
So how would, you know, 3 or 4 Komodo dragons take out that many cattle in that short amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It could just be that it happened to be a year where there were a lot of Komodo dragons, because you know populations, they ebb and they flow.
Yeah.
Could have been a good year for them. We should say that we're not gonna pick a winner for this episode because we're going based off of 2 very different
sightings. Yeah. But I did want to just, sorry, not to jump back, I wanted to talk about the 1,000 heads of cattle because I thought it could be altruistic feeding, where they're getting a bunch of blood from a bunch of cattle and taking it back to the bigger colony for the ones that maybe couldn't feed. That was my thought, if we were debating which we're not.
Of blood. Yeah, the one thing that I was thinking as well is vampire bats don't kill anything.
No, but I was thinking, so yeah, I mentioned Draculin earlier, and they also have the some proteins that cause numbing. This is a little bit of a stretch, but I thought it was cool. I thought as their body size got bigger, maybe they could produce more potent, like Draculin and those numbing proteins. So instead of just numbing an area, it would paralyze the animal, and then the Draculin would make them just bleed out. So the bats aren't doing it on purpose. They're not actually drinking all of the blood, but the animal can't move and it's just stuck bleeding out. How are you going to explain just the delicate little bites versus a Komodo, which is not a delicate little
like
bite?
Like I said, I thought that, and like, because Komodo dragons are either attacking you because you attacked it, and so it's hostile, or it's trying to eat you, in which case you're gonna get a large chunk taken out of you. And if these guys are just biting to bite because they're confused and their instincts are kind of a little messed up because of inbreeding, that they might just be chomping and letting go and leaving.
And I could also imagine that maybe their muscles and
it could be weaker,
their bone structure would be weaker, exactly, just from the inbreeding.
Absolutely. That's a very common thing in inbreeding is malnutrition and weak muscles.
Man, so you just have a really sickly mutated Komodo dragon, and I just have a big vampire bat with alopecia.
Yeah, these are very normal things.
Yeah.
Off the record, I do kind of believe in this guy.
So long, you well-meaning miscreants, and a good evening to you. This concludes tonight's showing of the Creature Feature Picture Show. Be sure to tune in to our next broadcast for more supernatural speculation. Until then, lock your doors, pray nothing goes bump in the night, and most importantly, stay spooky.